Zara Williams walked through the hallways of Lincoln High with her head down, clutching her books tightly against her chest. The 17-year-old had only been at this school for 3 months, and every single day felt like walking through a minefield. She was different here, and everyone seemed to notice. Her dark skin stood out in a school where most students looked nothing like her. Her quiet nature made her an easy target, and her simple clothes, while clean and neat clearly, weren't from the expensive stores where most of her classmates shopped. What they didn't know was that Zara chose to dress this way. What they didn't know was that her father had offered to buy her anything she wanted, but she preferred to blend in rather than stand out even more. The morning bell rang, and students rushed to their first period classes. Zara made her way to chemistry, hoping to slip into her usual seat at the back without drawing attention. But as she rounded the corner, she nearly crashed into the one person she tried hardest to avoid. Tyler Brennan stood 6 feet tall with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His father owned half the businesses in town, and Tyler never let anyone forget it. He wore his Letterman jacket like armor, and his group of followers hung on his every word like he was some kind of king. "Well, well, well," Tyler said, blocking Zara's path with a cruel smile. "Look what we have here. The charity case is trying to sneak past us again." Zara's heart started beating faster, but she kept her voice steady. "Excuse me, I need to get to class." Tyler's friends laughed, forming a semicircle around her. There was Brett, whose family owned the local car dealership, and Caleb, whose mother was the mayor. They all shared the same entitled attitude that came from growing up with everything handed to them. "What's the hurry?" Tyler asked, pretending to examine his nails. "We're just being friendly. You know, checking in on our scholarship student, making sure you're adjusting well to our school." The word "our" hit Zara like a slap. She hadn't told anyone about her scholarship, but somehow Tyler had found out. Small towns had a way of making everyone's business public, and Tyler's family connections meant he heard everything. "I'm not bothering anyone," Zara said quietly. "I just want to go to class and learn." "Oh, how noble," Brett chimed in. "The poor girl just wants to learn. Maybe we should help her learn a few things about how this school really works." Zara tried to step around them, but Tyler moved to block her again. Other students were starting to notice the commotion. Some stopped to watch, others hurried past with their heads down, grateful they weren't the target today. "See, here's the thing," Tyler said, his voice getting nastier. "This school has a certain reputation, a certain standard, and when people like you start showing up, it brings down the whole neighborhood. My dad pays a lot of taxes to keep this place nice, and, frankly, I don't think you appreciate what you've been given." Zara felt her face getting hot. She thought about her father sitting at home in his study, reading scripts or talking on the phone with his agent. He had no idea what she was going through every day. She had worked so hard to convince him that she wanted a normal high school experience, that she didn't want to be homeschooled or attend some exclusive private school where everyone would know who her father was. "I appreciate everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I work hard. I get good grades. I don't cause any trouble." "Good grades?" Caleb laughed. "Is that supposed to impress us? You're probably getting extra help from the teachers because they feel sorry for you. That's not the same as actually being smart." The bell rang again, warning students that class was about to start. But Tyler and his friends showed no signs of moving. If anything, they seemed to be enjoying the fact that they were making Zara late. Mrs. Henderson, the chemistry teacher, poked her head out of her classroom. She was a kind woman in her 50s who had been teaching for over 20 years. She saw what was happening and frowned. "Mr. Brennan," she called out. "Class is starting. All of you need to get to your classrooms immediately." "Just finishing up a conversation, Mrs. Henderson," Tyler called back with fake politeness. "We'll be right there." Mrs. Henderson looked like she wanted to say more, but Tyler's father was on the school board, and everyone knew it wasn't wise to cross the Brennan family. She gave Zara a sympathetic look before disappearing back into her classroom. Tyler leaned closer to Zara, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You think you're special, don't you? Coming in here with your sob story, taking a spot that should have gone to someone who actually belongs here, someone whose family has roots in this community. Zara's hands were shaking now, but not from fear. She was getting angry, and she had to fight to keep her voice controlled. Her father had taught her that anger was a tool, but only if you knew how to use it properly. "I belong here just as much as anyone else," she said, finally looking Tyler directly in the eyes. "I earned my place here." "Earned?" Tyler laughed, but there was something ugly in it. "With what? Your daddy's drug money? Your mama's welfare checks? What kind of earning are we talking about here, charity case?" The words hit Zara like physical blows. Tyler had no idea how wrong he was, but she couldn't correct him without revealing things she wasn't ready to share. Her father wasn't some absent criminal or deadbeat. He was one of the most famous action stars in the world, a man who had worked his entire life to build an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But more than that, he was the man who had chosen her. When she was 8 years old, living in a foster home after her birth parents died in a car accident, he had walked into her life and changed everything. He hadn't adopted her because he needed good publicity or because someone told him to. He had chosen her because he saw something special in her, something worth protecting and nurturing. "You don't know anything about my family," Zara said, her voice getting stronger. "I know enough," Tyler replied. "I know your kind doesn't belong here, and I know that sooner or later, you're going to realize it too and crawl back to whatever hole you came from." His friends laughed again, feeding off his cruelty like vultures. The hallway was mostly empty now, with just a few stragglers hurrying to class. Zara realized that no one was going to help her. No one was going to stand up to Tyler Brennan and his crew. But as she stood there, facing down her tormentor, something shifted inside her. She thought about all the conversations she'd had with her father about bullies, about people who tried to make themselves feel bigger by making others feel small. She thought about the strength he had shown throughout his career, facing down much worse than some spoiled high school kid. She was her father's daughter, even if no one here knew it yet. Zara straightened her shoulders and looked Tyler directly in the eye. "You're right about one thing," she said, her voice steady now. "You don't know my kind, and maybe that's your problem, not mine." Tyler's smile faltered for just a second. He wasn't used to people talking back to him, especially not the quiet scholarship kid he'd been tormenting for months. But he quickly recovered, his face twisting into something nastier. "Oh, so now you've got some attitude?" he said, stepping closer. "I think someone needs to learn some respect around here." Before Zara could respond, Tyler grabbed her chemistry textbook and tossed it down the hallway. The heavy book hit the floor with a loud thud, its pages scattering. Brett and Caleb laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. "Oops," Tyler said with fake concern. "Looks like you dropped something. Better go pick that up before you're even later to class." Zara watched her book lying there, its pages bent and crumpled. She had bought that book herself with money she'd earned from helping her father organize his home office during the summer. Every dollar had meant something to her, not because her family couldn't afford it, but because she wanted to feel like she was contributing to her own education. She walked over and knelt down to gather the scattered pages. As she did, Tyler's voice followed her. "Look at that, guys. Right where she belongs, on her knees, cleaning up messes." The laughter that followed felt like needles in Zara's skin. She wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their cruelty. She wanted to call her father right now and have him come to the school. She could picture Tyler's face when he realized who he'd been messing with. The thought was tempting, so very tempting. But she had made a promise to herself when she started, at Lincoln High. She wanted to make it on her own without her father's fame opening doors or fighting her battles. She wanted to know that she could succeed because of who she was, not because of who raised her. As she collected the last few pages, she heard footsteps approaching. A pair of worn sneakers appeared in her field of vision, and she looked up to see Tony Martinez crouching down beside her. Tony was a junior like her, but they'd never really talked before. He was one of the few other scholarship students at Lincoln High, and he usually kept to himself. "Here, let me help," Tony said quietly, gathering some of the pages that had scattered further down the hall. "Aw, how sweet," Tyler called out. The charity cases are sticking together. Maybe you can start your own little club. Tony ignored him completely, which seemed to annoy Tyler even more. He handed Zara the pages he'd collected and helped her stand up. Thanks, Zara whispered. Tony nodded and started walking toward his own classroom. Tyler wasn't about to let this act of kindness go unpunished. Hey, Martinez, Tyler called out. I wasn't done talking to you. Tony stopped and turned around slowly. Unlike Zara, he wasn't trying to avoid conflict. He'd grown up in a rough neighborhood where backing down from bullies only made things worse. What do you want, Brennan? Tony asked. I want to know why you think it's okay to interrupt when I'm having a conversation with someone. Didn't look like much of a conversation to me, Tony replied. Looked more like three guys picking on one girl. That's not really my definition of conversation. Tyler's face turned red. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. Brett and Caleb moved closer, sensing that things were about to escalate. You got something you want to say to me? Tyler asked, his voice getting dangerous. I already said it, Tony replied calmly. The tension in the hallway was thick enough to cut with a knife. Zara found herself caught between wanting Tony to back down for his own safety and being grateful that someone had finally stood up to Tyler's bullying. Mrs. Henderson appeared in her doorway again, this time looking more concerned than annoyed. All of you need to get to class right now or you're all getting detention. Just heading there now, Mrs. Henderson, Tyler said, his voice instantly switching back to that fake politeness he used with teachers. But his eyes never left Tony's face. As the group started to break up, Tyler made sure to bump hard into Tony's shoulder as he walked past. This isn't over, he whispered. Tony didn't flinch. I didn't think it was. Zara hurried into chemistry class, her mind racing from everything that had just happened. She slid into her usual seat at the back and tried to focus on Mrs. Henderson's lesson about molecular bonds, but her thoughts kept drifting. She thought about Tony's kindness and his courage in standing up to Tyler. She thought about Tyler's cruel words and the way he seemed to enjoy causing pain. But mostly she thought about the choice she was facing every day. At home, she was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. Her father's house was like a fortress, with security systems and gates that kept the outside world at bay. When they traveled together, bodyguards cleared the way and fans screamed his name. Studio executives took his calls immediately, and directors competed for his attention. But here at Lincoln High, she was just the scholarship kid from the wrong side of town. Here, she was someone to be pushed around and humiliated. The contrast was almost too much to handle sometimes. During lunch, Zara found herself sitting alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. She'd brought her lunch from home just like she did every day. It wasn't because she couldn't afford to buy lunch at school. Her father had given her more than enough money for that, but she preferred the simple sandwich and apple that reminded her of the foster home where she'd lived before her adoption. She was halfway through her sandwich when Tony approached her table. Mind if I sit? He asked. Zara nodded, surprised but pleased to have the company. Tony sat down across from her with his own brown bag lunch. Sorry about this morning, he said. I probably made things worse for you with Tyler. You didn't make anything worse, Zara replied. He's been like that since my first day here. You were just being decent, which seems to be pretty rare around here. Tony smiled at that. Yeah, this place isn't exactly known for its warm and fuzzy atmosphere, especially if you're not from one of the founding families. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both of them watching the social dynamics play out around them. The popular kids held court at their usual tables, while the athletes dominated another section of the cafeteria. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, except for kids like Tony and Zara. Can I ask you something? Tony said eventually. Sure. Why do you let them treat you like that? I mean, I've seen you in class. You're smart, you're tough, you don't have to take their garbage. Zara considered the question carefully. How could she explain that she was trying to prove something to herself? How could she tell him that she had access to resources that could shut down Tyler's bullying in a heartbeat, but that using them would feel like cheating? It's complicated, she said finally. Most things are. Tony replied with understanding. The rest of that day passed quietly, but Zara could feel something building in the air like the pressure before a storm. Tyler and his friends kept looking at her and Tony during classes, whispering among themselves and laughing. It wasn't the kind of laughter that meant something funny had happened. It was the kind that meant trouble was coming. After school, Zara walked to her locker to gather her books for homework. The hallways were mostly empty except for students involved in after-school activities. She liked this time of day because it was peaceful, and she could move around without worrying about running into Tyler's group. But as she closed her locker and turned around, she found herself face to face with Brett and Caleb. Tyler was nowhere to be seen, which somehow made the situation feel even more dangerous. "Well, well," Brett said, leaning against the lockers. "Look who's all alone now. Where's your little boyfriend to protect you?" "Tony's not my boyfriend," Zara said, clutching her backpack straps. "And I don't need anyone to protect me." Caleb laughed. "That's funny because from where we're standing you look pretty defenseless. Tyler wanted us to deliver a message." Zara's heart started beating faster, but she kept her voice steady. "What message?" "He wants you to know that what happened this morning was just the beginning," Brett said. "See, Tyler doesn't like being embarrassed, and when your little friend decided to play hero, that embarrassed Tyler in front of the whole school." "Nobody embarrassed Tyler," Zara replied. "Tony just helped me pick up my book. If Tyler felt embarrassed by that, maybe he should think about why." Brett's face darkened. "You've got some mouth on you for someone in your position. Maybe it's time someone taught you to keep it shut." He took a step closer, and Zara instinctively stepped back until she was pressed against the lockers. She thought about screaming for help, but the hallways were nearly empty. She thought about her father's training, the self-defense classes he'd insisted she take. But using those skills would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Here's how this is going to work," Caleb said, moving to block her other side. "You're going to apologize to Tyler tomorrow in front of everyone. You're going to admit that you don't belong at this school, and you're going to promise to keep your head down and stay out of our way." "And if I don't?" Zara asked, surprised by her own boldness. Brett smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Then, things are going to get very unpleasant for you. And for your little friend Tony, too. We know where he lives, you know. We know his family doesn't have money for lawyers or connections to make problems go away." The threat against Tony made Zara's blood boil. It was one thing for them to come after her, but Tony had only been trying to help. He didn't deserve to be dragged into this mess. "Leave Tony out of this," she said, her voice getting stronger. "This is between you and me." "No, see, that's where you're wrong," Brett replied. "This is between us and anyone who thinks they can disrespect Tyler Brennan. Your friend made his choice this morning when he decided to get involved." Before Zara could respond, she heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. All three of them turned to see Mr. Rodriguez, the school janitor, pushing his cleaning cart toward them. Brett and Caleb immediately stepped back and put on innocent expressions. "Everything okay here?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. He was a kind man in his 60s who had worked at the school for over 20 years. He knew trouble when he saw it. "Everything's fine, Mr. Rodriguez," Brett said with fake friendliness. "We were just having a study group discussion." Mr. Rodriguez looked at Zara's face and clearly didn't believe them, but he also knew better than to directly accuse the mayor's son and the car dealer's kid of bullying. "Well, the building's closing soon. You kids better head home." "Of course, sir," Caleb said. "We were just leaving." As they walked away, Brett made sure to bump into Zara's shoulder hard enough to slam her back against the lockers. "Think about what we said," he whispered. Mr. Rodriguez waited until they were gone before approaching Zara. "You sure you're all right, mija?" Zara nodded, even though she wasn't sure at all. "I'm fine. Thank you for checking." "Those boys giving you trouble?" Zara wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to explain about the months of harassment, the cruel comments, and the threats. But she also knew that Mr. Rodriguez was just a janitor. What could he do against families like the Brennans and the Calhouns? "It's nothing I can't handle," she said finally. Mr. Rodriguez looked like he wanted to say more, but he just nodded. "You be careful, mija, and if you need help, you know where to find me." Zara thanked him and hurried out of the building. As she walked home, her mind was racing with everything that had happened. Brett and Caleb's threats kept echoing in her head, especially the part about Tony. She couldn't let him get hurt because of her problems. When she got home, the house was quiet. Her father was still at the studio working on his latest film. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, was in the kitchen preparing dinner. This was Zara's normal routine, coming home to an empty house, doing her homework alone, eating dinner by herself more often than not. But tonight felt different. Tonight she felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her like never before. She thought about all the times her father had told her that she could come to him with any problem, no matter how big or small. She thought about the love in his eyes when he looked at her, the fierce protectiveness that came out whenever anyone even hinted at treating her badly. He would end this bullying situation in a heartbeat. One phone call from him to the school, and Tyler Brennan would never bother her again. One conversation between her father and Tyler's father, and the whole family would probably leave town. But then what? Would she spend the rest of her life knowing that she couldn't fight her own battles? Would she always wonder if she was strong enough to stand on her own, or if she needed her father's fame and power to protect her? She was still thinking about this when her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Tony. "Hey, heard Brennan's friends cornered you after school, you okay?" Zara stared at the message, touched that he was worried about her. She started to type back that she was fine, but then she stopped. Maybe she didn't have to face this alone. Maybe accepting help from a friend wasn't the same as running to her father. "Can you talk?" she typed back. Her phone rang almost immediately. "What happened?" Tony's voice was serious, concerned. "They threatened you," Zara said without preamble. "Brett and Caleb. They said if I don't apologize to Tyler tomorrow, they're going to come after you too." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. "Let them come," Tony said finally. "I'm not scared of those spoiled rich kids." "But I am," Zara admitted. "I'm scared of what they might do to you because you were nice to me." "Listen to me," Tony said, his voice gentle but firm. "You can't control other people's choices. I chose to help you this morning because it was the right thing to do. If there are consequences for that, then I'll deal with them. But I'm not going to let you blame yourself for their actions." Zara felt tears building in her eyes. When was the last time someone had spoken to her like this? When was the last time someone had been willing to stand beside her without knowing who her father was, or what she could do for them? The next morning came too quickly. Zara had barely slept, tossing and turning as she thought about Brett and Caleb's ultimatum. She kept checking her phone, hoping Tony might text her with some kind of solution, but there were no new messages. She got ready for school slowly, staring at herself in the mirror. The girl looking back at her seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable. Dark eyes that held too much worry for someone her age. Hair that she kept simple and neat. Clothes that were nice, but not flashy. Nothing about her appearance suggested that she lived in a mansion with security cameras and gates. Nothing suggested that her father's latest movie had made $200 million worldwide. Nothing suggested that she had access to resources that most people could only dream of. But as she looked at her reflection, she saw something else too. She saw the stubborn tilt to her chin that she'd inherited from her father. She saw the quiet strength in her eyes that had helped her survive losing her birth parents and living in foster care. She saw the determination that had driven her to excel in every subject at school despite the constant harassment. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. At school, the morning started, normally enough. Zara made it to her first 3 classes without incident, though she noticed Tyler and his friends watching her with expectant looks. They were waiting for her to approach Tyler and make the apology they'd demanded. She had no intention of doing any such thing. During lunch, she sat with Tony again. He seemed tense, constantly looking around the cafeteria like he was expecting trouble. "You don't have to sit with me," Zara said quietly. "I know they're watching us." "Good," Tony replied, taking a big bite of his sandwich. "Let them watch. I'm not going to change my routine because some rich kids think they own the place." But even as he said it, Zara could see the worry in his eyes. Tony was brave, but he wasn't stupid. He knew that Tyler's family had influence in this town. He knew that crossing them could have real consequences for someone like him. "Tony," Zara began, but he cut her off. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. We're friends now, and friends stick together. That's how it works." Friends. The word hit Zara harder than she expected. She'd had friends before her parents died, back when she was little, and the world seemed simpler. But since the adoption, since moving to her father's world of movie sets and red carpets and people who wanted things from her, real friendship had been hard to find. "I need to tell you something," she said suddenly. "What?" Zara looked around the cafeteria, making sure no one was listening. "My family, we're not what people think we are." Tony frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're not poor. The scholarship thing, it's complicated, but it's not because we can't afford tuition." "Then why are you here instead of some fancy private school?" Zara took a deep breath. "Because I wanted to feel normal. I wanted to see if I could make it on my own without anyone knowing about my family's situation." Before Tony could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Zara looked up to see Tyler standing there with Brett, Caleb, and two other guys she didn't recognize. The cafeteria around them had gone noticeably quieter. Well, Tyler said with a cold smile. "If it isn't the charity case and her little protector. I was expecting to hear from you this morning, Zara. I'm disappointed that I didn't." "I don't have anything to say to you," Zara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Tyler pulled out his phone and held it up like he was recording. "See? That's where you're wrong. Because I think the whole school would be interested in hearing what you do have to say." "Put that away," Tony said, standing up. "Sit down, Martinez, before you make this worse for yourself," Brett warned. But Tony didn't sit down. Instead, he stepped closer to Tyler. "I said put it away." "Or what?" Tyler laughed. "You'll make me? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "Yeah," Tony said calmly. "I'm talking to a coward who needs 4 other guys to back him up against one girl." The insult hit its mark. Tyler's face flushed red, and his hand tightened on his phone. "You have no idea what you're messing with here. Neither do you," Zara said quietly, but something in her voice made everyone at the table look at her. Tyler turned his attention back to her, sensing weakness. "Finally ready to apologize? Ready to admit you don't belong here?" Zara stood up, slowly, her hands steady now. She thought about her father, probably sitting in his trailer between takes, trusting her to handle her own problems. She thought about all the lessons he'd taught her about standing up for yourself and protecting the people you care about. "I belong here as much as anyone," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent cafeteria. "And I'm not apologizing for existing." Tyler's smile turned nasty. "Big words for someone in your position. But maybe it's time everyone knew exactly what your position really is." He held up his phone higher, making sure the camera was pointed at her. "Why don't you tell everyone about your family, Zara? Tell them about where you really come from. Tell them about why you're really here." Zara felt her heart racing, but not from fear anymore, from anger. Tyler thought he was about to humiliate her by exposing her background, but he had no idea what he was actually doing. "You want to know about my family?" she asked, taking a step toward him. Something in her tone made Tyler's confident expression waver slightly. "Yeah, I do. I think everyone does." The cafeteria was completely silent now. Even the lunch staff had stopped what they were doing to watch. Zara could see other students holding up their phones, ready to record whatever was about to happen. "My family," Zara said slowly, "taught me that bullies like you are usually just scared little boys who've never been told no." Tyler's face turned even redder. "You have no idea what you're talking about, don't I?" Zara continued, feeling a strength building inside her that she'd kept hidden for months. "You think because your daddy owns some businesses in this little town that makes you special? You think because you can buy your way out of trouble that gives you the right to treat people like garbage? My father could buy and sell your whole family," Tyler snarled. "Could he?" Zara asked, and now she was smiling, not a nice smile. The kind of smile her father got in his movies right before he took down the bad guy. Tyler seemed to sense that something had shifted, but he was too committed to back down now. Not in front of the whole school, not while he was recording. Yeah, he could. Your scholarship paperwork says your family makes less than $30,000 a year. My father makes more than that in a day. Interesting, Zara said. And what does your father do again? Run a few local businesses, own some real estate? He's a respected businessman in this community, Tyler said defensively. Respected in this community, Zara repeated. This community of, what, 5,000 people? Tony was looking at her, with confusion, not understanding where she was going with this. But something in Tyler's expression suggested he was starting to get nervous. Size doesn't matter, Tyler said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Doesn't it? Zara asked. Because my father's work reaches a few more people than that. She pulled out her own phone, no longer caring about keeping her secret. It was time Tyler Brennan learned exactly who he'd been messing with for the past 4 months. Zara's fingers moved quickly across her phone screen, while the entire cafeteria watched in complete silence. Tyler kept his phone pointed at her, still recording, but his confident smirk was starting to fade as he noticed the change in her demeanor. What are you doing? Brett asked nervously. Just making a phone call, Zara said calmly, pressing the number for her father's private line. The one he always answered no matter what he was doing. Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced now. What, calling your mommy to come pick you up? Maybe she can bring some food stamps while she's at it. His friends laughed, but even they seemed to sense that something was shifting. Other students were pressing closer, phones out, sensing that whatever was about to happen would be worth recording. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, a familiar voice answered. Hey, sweetheart. Shouldn't you be in class right now? Zara smiled at the sound of her father's voice. Even through the phone, she could hear the warmth and concern that was always there when he talked to her. In the background, she could hear the sounds of a movie set, people talking, equipment moving, the controlled chaos of a major production. Dad, she said, making sure her voice carried across the quiet cafeteria. I'm sorry to bother you at work, but I need you to settle something. For me? Of course, baby girl. What's going on? Tyler's expression was starting to change as he processed what he was hearing. The confidence was draining from his face, replaced by confusion and the first hints of worry. There's a boy at school who seems to think his father is more successful than you are. Zara continued, her eyes never leaving Tyler's face. He says his dad could buy and sell our whole family. There was a pause on the other end of the line and then a deep chuckle that everyone in the cafeteria could hear through the phone. Is that right? And what does this boy's father do? He owns some businesses here in town. Real estate, I think. Maybe a few stores. Sounds impressive, right? Her father said. And Zara could hear the amusement in his voice. And he thinks that makes him more successful than a guy who just signed a 3-picture deal worth $400 million? The cafeteria erupted in whispers and gasps. Students looked at each other in shock, trying to process what they were hearing. Tyler's phone was shaking in his hand now. Who? Who are you talking to? Tyler whispered. Zara smiled and put the phone on speaker. Dad, would you mind introducing yourself to my classmates? They seem to have some questions about our family. Sure thing, sweetheart. The voice that came through the speaker was one that most people in the cafeteria recognized immediately. It was the voice that had been in dozens of action movies, the voice that had become synonymous with one of the biggest franchises in Hollywood history. This is Vincent Cross, he said, using his real name rather than his stage name. I'm Zara's father, and I'm currently on set filming my latest movie. Now, someone want to tell me why my daughter is having to defend our family's honor at lunchtime? The silence in the cafeteria was deafening. Tyler's face had gone completely white. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor, the recording still running. Vincent Cross. Even people who didn't follow movies knew that name. He was one of the highest-paid actors in the world, a man whose films had made over $3 billion worldwide. His action franchise alone had spawned 8 movies and countless merchandise deals. Dad, this is Tyler Brennan, Zara said sweetly. He's the one who's been telling everyone that I don't belong at this school, that I'm just some charity case who should be grateful for the scraps. Tyler Brennan, her father repeated, and something in his voice made several students take a step back. Son, is that true? Have you been bullying my daughter? Tyler opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around desperately at his friends, but Brett and Caleb were staring at him like they'd never seen him before. The other students were backing away, suddenly realizing that they'd been watching someone harass the daughter of one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. I didn't know, Tyler finally stammered. You didn't know what? Vincent's voice was getting harder now. You didn't know she was my daughter? So that makes it okay to treat her like garbage? To threaten her and her friends? Mr. Cross, Tony said suddenly, stepping closer to the phone. Tyler and his friends also threatened me because I helped Zara pick up her books yesterday. And you are? Tony Martinez, sir. I'm Zara's friend. Well, Tony Martinez, thank you for standing up for my daughter. That takes real courage, and I appreciate it. Tyler was looking around desperately now, realizing that his social position at the school had just evaporated completely. The same students who had laughed at his cruel jokes about Zara were now looking at him with disgust and fear. Mr. Cross, Tyler said, his voice cracking. I'm really sorry, I didn't mean any of it, I was just joking around. Joking around? Vincent's voice was ice cold now. Son, let me explain something to you. I've spent the last 9 years raising an incredible young woman who has more strength, intelligence, and character in her little finger than you seem to have in your entire body. She chose to attend your school because she wanted a normal high school experience. She wanted to see if she could succeed based on her own merits without her last name opening doors for her. The cafeteria was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Every word was being recorded by dozens of phones. Instead of respecting that choice, you decided to make her life miserable. You called her names, you threatened her, and you made her dread coming to school every day. That's not joking around, son, that's cruelty. Tyler was crying now, tears streaming down his face as he realized the magnitude of what he'd done. Not just to Zara, but to his own reputation and future. I'm sorry, he whispered. Please, I'm so sorry. You're not apologizing to me, Vincent said firmly. You're apologizing to my daughter, and to Tony, and to every other student you've bullied over the years. Zara watched Tyler's complete breakdown with a mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been pity. She had the power to destroy him completely now. One word from her father to the right people, and Tyler's family business could be ruined. His college applications could be sabotaged. His entire future could disappear. But, as she looked at him sobbing in front of the whole school, she realized she didn't want that kind of revenge. Dad, she said softly, I think Tyler understands now. Are you sure, sweetheart? Because I can have my lawyers look into this family very quickly. Tyler's eyes went wide with terror at that suggestion. I'm sure, Zara said. But I think there should be some consequences. What did you have in mind? Zara looked around the cafeteria, at all the faces watching her with a mixture of awe and fear. She thought about all the other students Tyler had probably bullied over the years, all the kids who didn't have famous fathers to call when things got bad. I think Tyler should apologize to everyone he's ever bullied, she said. Publicly. And I think he should spend the rest of the semester doing community service at the school, helping Mr. Rodriguez with cleaning, helping in the kitchen, showing that he understands what real work looks like. That sounds fair, Vincent said. Tyler, do you agree to those terms? Tyler nodded frantically. Yes, sir. Whatever Zara wants, I'll do anything. Good, because if I hear that you've bothered my daughter or any other student ever again, those lawyers I mentioned will become very real, very quickly. Do we understand each other? Yes, sir. Completely. As Zara ended the call, the cafeteria slowly came back to life. Students were whispering excitedly, sharing videos and looking at her with completely different eyes than they had just 10 minutes before. But the person whose reaction mattered most to her was Tony, who was grinning from ear to ear. Vincent Cross, he said quietly. Your dad is Vincent Cross? Zara smiled back at him. Yeah, is that okay? Are you kidding? That's the coolest thing ever. But you know what the really cool part is? What? You didn't need him to fight your battles. You chose when and how to use that power. That takes real strength. As they walked out of the cafeteria together, Zara felt lighter than she had in months. She had learned something important about herself that day. She was strong enough to stand on her own, but smart enough to know when to ask for help. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly the kind of person her father had raised her to be.